A beautiful morning here. So peaceful and yet energized at the same time. And for me, my experience of those awakening moments and that enlightenment, that shunyata, that feeling, it is a feeling of energized peace. It is not a blank void. It is not a null peace. It is not a negative, empty space, but an energized peace that is filled with life, filled with vibrance. I mean, I believe that's why we feel so at peace and happy in nature, with as few people around as possible, because there is a simplicity to that life energy. There is a simplicity to the life that just effortlessly seems to grow around. And a stillness to it, a silence to it. But not a blank silence. There is an expectant energy almost. Anyway, you know what it is. Bit of spiritual bleach here today. That high strength spiritual bleach to burn through those spiritual blockages. Not that there is any such thing as a spiritual blockage. There is no external force blocking the path. There is no internal force or energy blocking the path. All that's happened is that there is a subtle background belief, a subtle background concept or thought that survived, that hid your initial awakening, your initial glimpse into your true nature, your initial practice in meditation, in your spiritual discipline, in your religious discipline, that moment of awakening and all was well, fully here in the presence of being, in the here and now. But there are some ideas and opinions that run and hide and still continue to run in the background. And so we need to pour that spiritual bleach through the entirety of the being to flush out, to turn the light up on consciousness, turning the light of conscious awareness up throughout the entirety of the being, body and mind. And that will flush out these background beliefs, opinions, ideas that are just running away in the background, that are endarkening your experience of life. Everyone is already enlightened, already. You are already the light of consciousness, you are already. But our experience of life and our identification with the individual body-mind endarkens that. So the spiritual path is actually a release and an evaporation of the clouds that endarken our experience. Just as when a cloud passes over the sun on a sunny day, casting shadow, we might feel like it's a dark day, but it's not. It's still a sunny day. It's just that there's one cloud that's passing over the sun momentarily. It is our identification with the individual body-mind that is that cloud that passes across the sun. So, spiritual bleach today. And I know I've got a tricky sell on this one. I know it's a difficult sell because you've read the thumbnail and you've read the title and you're probably thinking, how on earth? How on earth is he going to wangle this one? Well, this is quite an intense one and it might not be for everyone, and this might be more suitable for those who have been in the realm of Advaita, non-duality, the non-dual understanding, and the practices and disciplines that relate to consciousness itself for some time. So if you've been on that path for a while, this one might be more suitable for you, as we're answering some of the more prominent, more pertinent, and, how should we say, the stickier questions, the harder sticking points to burn through. And consciousness as it relates to the body and the questions that arise Namely, if I am infinite universal consciousness, then how come I can only feel this one body? If I'm everywhere at all time, if I am the presence of awareness in all things everywhere, if the universe is consciousness, how come I'm only aware of one individual body-mind? That's what we're going to answer today, hopefully. But as this is quite intense, there are 3 stages to this, and there are 3 progressive stages that I'd like to extrapolate on today. And these are progressive. So it might be that you've never heard of Advaita before, Nonduality before, or Advaita before, which is kind of the space I'm coming from here. And but you are somewhere in the spiritual journey. This first stage might be enough. And that's how I've designed these 3 stages today. So it might be enough to just hear the first one, and that's enough of a contemplation to take away and to just contemplate and meditate on and just examine and explore. And that might be enough to begin the evaporation of this dark and darkening belief that keeps us a little bit stuck on the spiritual path. So the first stage here is an examination of our perception as it relates to our felt experience of the body. The belief of how the mind and consciousness relates to this physical body. Now, you might not have examined this for some time because it kind of falls into the ever-present background of our experience that we feel is just obvious. So we're not going to allow ourselves to go into, well, it's obvious today. So examine, maybe a re-examining, a re-exploration of how you perceive and what you believe about the mind's relationship to the body, consciousness relationship to the body. And we can do this by examining the words we use to describe this relationship. Do you say, I have a body? In general speech, in general talk, in general parlance, do you say, I feel my body? Do you say, I am my body? Do you say, my body? How do we perceive the body? It's going to be different for everyone. There's an almost infinite number of expressions of belief about this, and yours will be completely different to anyone else's. This is fascinating. When you start exploring this and understanding the implications of this, your mind is going to be expanding rapidly, because you come to understand, wow, the way I perceive my body and believe myself to be in this body or as this body isn't going to be exactly the same as anyone else's. Might be similar, but it's not going to be exactly the same. And if you think across different cultures with different beliefs, different schooling, different frameworks of understanding about the world and about what the world is and how it's made up of and what is matter and what is flesh and what is... Think of the infinite expressions of belief about how we relate to our own body. So, examine your own individual belief. And the best way of doing this is to examine the language you use to describe this phenomena. Do you believe I am a body? Do you believe you have a body? Do you believe that... Is there a background sort of a feeling or an opinion that you somehow operate or pilot a body? Are you a physical brain? Are you a brain made of matter that sits in the head, and it is the brain that contains thoughts and therefore contains consciousness, that receives signals from the body and then sort of condenses all of that and forms a map of the world from that, forms an understanding of the world from the senses, the sense of the body, the perceptions, coalesces everything together and forms a life sort of out of that? That tends to be, that's where I've come from with my kind of more scientific atheistic kind of background. But somebody else might have a sense, no, it's not like that at all. What it actually is I am a soul. I'm an individual soul that inhabits a body that is made of something called flesh, but that flesh was created by a divine creator, and that divine creator breathed a soul into the body. Like I say, there's an infinite number of these things. But often, these things were taught, or we arrived at these conclusions early on in our lives. Very early on in childhood. We either got taught this or we figured out our own kind of understanding, and it fell into the background and has been running ever since because it seems to work. You know, it seems to make sense. That's why we create and hold on to these beliefs anyway, because it makes some kind of sense. So that is step one of our spiritual bleach today. That is the first stage, and it might be enough if you haven't considered this for some time. Maybe you have. Maybe you've been on the spiritual path and you have been kind of working through this, or maybe you haven't. But either way, that's a very good first step with what we're going to be examining today. Consciousness as it relates to the body, and answering some of those very difficult questions in Advaita about consciousness, how it relates to the body. So, stage one right there. Just examining your beliefs about how consciousness relates to the body and the language and words that we use to describe that phenomena, because that will give you a massive clue into your own mindset, into your own understanding, your own subtle background beliefs that are constantly running in the background. But we realize with some surprise that a belief is just a belief. That's all it is. It's not necessarily reality. After all, if everybody has a different belief about how they operate their body or inhabit their body or they are their body, then who's right, you know? Would the real belief please stand up? Would the real person please stand up? Would the true individual with the correct belief please stand up? Because we're struggling here and we're all arguing with each other about what it is. So could the real one please stand up? Now, moving into stage two. And this is an intermediary stage before I want to get to the end of what I really want to talk about here. So, if you haven't come across this alternative way of understanding this, if you haven't yet come across the infinite universal consciousness model of understanding experience, that's what this stage is for. So, what if it turns out that consciousness does not arise within the body, the individual body? It just appears to. It just seems like it does. What if consciousness is actually everywhere? And the body-mind is felt by it, and the body-mind, understandably, comes to believe that that infinite universal consciousness originates within that individual body-mind. This can be a bit of a head scratcher and a bit of a pickle. I didn't plan that, by the way. I didn't plan to actually literally scratch my head at that point, but there we are. So, the infinite universal consciousness is everywhere. It is the entirety of the universe, and everything arises within that infinite universal consciousness. And the phenomena of the individual body-mind arises and moves within that consciousness, similar to how a fish swims through the water, but is never... A fish doesn't know what water is. A fish has no idea what water is because it never leaves. It's an ever-present, constant background element of experience that we rarely pay attention to. But every single experience we've ever had, we've been aware of. You've never had an experience that you're not aware of, not once. It can't happen. So this is a different model of understanding how the body is felt by consciousness that you may not have come across before. There's even many spiritual paths, many spiritual paths and methods of belief and systems of belief that never really question this. But we could say that this infinite universal consciousness that is aware of this individual body-mind, we could refer to it as the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit. That's just one different way that we could look at that or use that terminology. We could just say it's the one infinite being, Brahman, consciousness, God, whichever word you want to use. So that's this second stage here. And so what if rather than consciousness being within the body and sort of shining out of the body, what if consciousness is outside of the body shining in? So that's a little shift that we can make here and begin to apply that spiritual bleach to this spiritual blockage. What if we could shift things around and say, it's not that I have consciousness, it's that there is consciousness, and consciousness is aware of this body, this mind, these thoughts, these feelings, these activities, these behaviors, this physical felt sense of a body. Consciousness is outside of the body, shining upon the body. Consciousness does not originate within and shine out, but is outside, shining in. That's just one little pointing to just start contemplating. What if? What if? One of the best analogies that I can have for this is when you look at the moon and you see it shining so brightly. I need to stand up to move about a bit because my back's beginning to get sore. So, what if you look at the moon? You look up at the moon in the night sky and it's a beautiful clear night sky. Completely black, pitch black canvas, and there is a full moon that you can see clearly and it's shining brightly. So bright that you have to sort of squint your eyes. That's how bright this full moon is tonight. Now if you didn't know that the moonlight is actually the sunlight reflecting off of the moon is just grey rock, just blank inert grey rock, but we know that the sun light shines off of the moon, it bounces off of the moon, and that's what makes the moon shine. But let's say you didn't know that. Let's eradicate that belief straight away. Let's just say you never learnt that. You missed that day in school. That day in school where they taught you that the moon shines because sunlight shines upon the moon and that's why it shines. You missed that day at school. You had chicken pox. Sorry, kid. And you never learnt this. When you look at the moon and see it shining and you have no idea about the sun, you would be forgiven for thinking that the moon is its own light source. Right? That is a perfectly logical thing to think. Perfectly logical. Based on the evidence. So you have no knowledge, no thought, based on the evidence of what you can see clearly with your own eyes. It is so obvious that the moon is lit up and it appears to be lit up from inside. That's what it looks like. Now we know that's not the reality, but that is absolutely what it looks like. And on a beautiful clear night sky, the moon shining so brightly, the moon shining so brightly, to all intents and purposes, it absolutely appears as though the moon is a source of light, that light is originating from and emanating from the moon. But we know that it's actually sunlight that is reflecting off of the moon's surface. Now let's apply that same principle and concept to consciousness. Now consciousness here is represented by the sunlight, and the body and mind is the moon. The body and mind is just the grey, inert rock, and consciousness is the sunlight that bounces off of it and creates the appearance that consciousness is originating from the body, that consciousness is originating from the mind. Does this make sense? As an analogy, that's the best one that I can think of to explain and to shift the perspective of how consciousness works. This also then explains why it seems so obvious to us, according to our senses, according to what appears obvious. It appears so obvious that consciousness is originating from the body and mind, because that's what it appears to be. But just as it appears that light is bouncing off of the moon, just as it appears that the moon is shining light from out of itself, but we know that it's not the case, it just appears to be, we know that our senses can lie to us. We know that just because that's how something appears, that doesn't necessarily make it the reality of the situation. So stay with me here, because the mind doesn't really like this kind of talk, so it's going to start wanting to go and make a coffee or something, or say, this is good, but I'll watch it later, or it'll say, oh, this is da-da-da-da-da. The mind's going to start chattering here. But stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. So, what if it turns out that consciousness arises or emanates outside of the body, shines upon the body, and that is why you have the felt sense of the body, because you are aware of the sensations in the body, you are aware of the thoughts and feelings in the mind. Now you can feel this right now. Don't let your mind take hold of this like it's a concept and turn it into just another idea. And look, I'm well aware I'm throwing a lot of images out here, a lot of analogies and metaphors. I know I'm throwing a lot out there. At some point we have to discard those as well, because actually we can just go to our felt experience and truly feel this understanding. The metaphors and stories are just there as a pointing towards truth, but they are not truth itself. And the reality is it doesn't quite work like that either, but it's the best analogy that we have, the best framework for understanding that we have. So, what you are feeling when you feel the body and mind is actually the consciousness that is shining upon the body and mind. The awareness. And that's what we need to start breaking down here. That's the part we need to start understanding deeply. You are aware of the sensations in the body and the mind, but that does not necessarily mean that you are the body and the mind. I've just realised it's starting to rain quite heavily, so I'm going to have to relocate to my car. Now, bear with me. Apologies for the interruption in the talk. Just continue to contemplate. Continue to contemplate that consciousness may actually be outside the body, shining upon the body, just as the moon is a dark rock but is lit up by the sunlight. the sensations, the felt sense of the body and the mind is lit up by consciousness. And what do I mean by lit up? What I mean is you are aware of these sensations, thoughts, and feelings. So this is stage 2. A different model of understanding the world, a different model of understanding reality. This is stage 2. Now we're going to be moving into stage 3, the car stage. This is Zen in action right here. Obviously I'm having to adapt, change, move things around a bit. And naturally that's going to result in a little frustration, disappointment and interruption of my attention. But we practice Zen in the field. This is spirituality in the field. This is Advaita in motion. Advaita in practice right here. I'm not going to let it bother me. I'm aware of that frustration, that annoyance rising up, but I'm not going to let it interrupt the flow of my video right here. In the storm, the willow bent and therefore survived. The mighty oak tree could not bend and therefore was felled. One of Aesop's greatest fables right there. It's an absolute banger. And speaking of bangers, check my car out. That's an absolute banger too. Here we go. Right, boom, perfect. All right, thank you for bearing with me, team. As I say, in the storm the willow bent and survived. The mighty oak could not bend and was felled. And what does that mean? Well, it means that when adverse situations happen, when adverse issues occur, you must bend, flow and adapt with the situation. That's what the willow tree does in a storm. It can bend and flow and flap everywhere. But the oak tree cannot bend. It can't flow, it can't flap with the wind. And so when the storm rolls in, the oak is blown over, the willow tree is fine because it can move. That is Wu Wei, the gentle way. In the storm, the willow bent and survived. The mighty oak could not bend and was felled. So, bringing it back here to the moon analogy, let us contemplate that consciousness is the sunlight shining upon the moon, and that's what gives the moon the appearance of glowing. So, how does this work, practically speaking, in the body? If we take a moment here, and we've already examined the beliefs of what we usually believe about the body and mind. Do you have a body? Do you have a mind? Or you are your body, you are your mind? So let's just take a different look. What if instead of that we could say, I am aware of my body. I am aware of my mind. But that's all I can say. I can't say I am my body. I can't say I am my mind, because I don't, although that's how it appears, I can't say that for certain. All I can say for certain, for absolute certain, is that I am aware of this body and I am aware of this mind. Now this awareness, this is key now, it sounds almost too simple, but this awareness is the consciousness. This awareness, if you go into your experience now, let's really do this now, no future, no past, no present, just the felt experience, the felt presence of being now. Don't be so interested in what you are aware of, but just be interested in the awareness itself. Our minds become fixated often on what we are aware of, but very rarely examine what is the place of origination of the awareness itself. So that's stage 2 on this one. And here we are coming to the point of the video. You don't have a body. You are aware of the sensations in the body. You are aware of a body. You are aware of a mind, but that's all. So, coming to stage 3 right here. I mean, so stage 1 and 2 might be enough, okay? That might be enough to contemplate, that might be enough to kind of consider, and that might be enough to just take you into the next stage of your understanding, the next stage of your awakening, might just help you to break through a little more of the spiritual progress, which has seemingly, apparently, been blocked for some time. But if we're ready to move on to stage 3, because naturally, if we come to this teaching, this understanding, at some point, we become immersed in this felt experience. And you realize, oh wow, okay, yes, that's amazing. It's very liberating, because you're no longer limited to the body and mind. You're no longer constrained to the individual singular body-mind. As you realize that you're the infinite universal consciousness, and this is just one singular appearance within it. And that practice itself will be enough to fully liberate anyone. You stick with that understanding, that contemplation, and meditate on that, immersed within the experience of the awareness itself, and begin to cease being so interested in what you're aware of, but simply remain as the awareness, and that's it. There's a lot of freedom in that. But naturally, the questions will arise. But if I am infinite universal consciousness, why am I only aware of one single body? If I'm everywhere at all times, why am I only aware of one mind, one thought stream, one line of thoughts and feelings? Why am I only aware of a singular body's sensations? Why not? Surely I'd be able to feel everybody else's. Well, consciousness can feel everybody else's as well as yours. But you as the individual can't. It's not that infinite universal consciousness is only aware of one individual body-mind. One individual body-mind is aware of one individual body-mind. This one can only be aware of this one. To take this back to the moon analogy, it's back to this, the trick of appearance, the fact our senses can lie to us. And why don't we zoom the picture out and condense the felt sense of the body, mind, including your personal history, your future, all of your narratives, all of your understandings, everything, just condense it into one singular sense. It's just a sense of one individual, the sense of this individual body-mind, just one condensed sense. Now, to take this back to the moon analogy, it appears as though the moon is shining brightly, but there is black void space around the moon where there is a total absence of light. And this is exactly how it works when we come into that infinite universal consciousness felt experience of the body. I am acutely aware of this body sensation, the contents of this mind. That is what I am utterly acutely aware of, in the same way that the moon shining brightly is the only thing that you can focus on in the night sky. It's the only thing that you can see, because it's the only thing there that can reflect the light. the individual body-mind is the only thing there that is reflecting the consciousness, that the awareness is landing upon. Language is obviously a very imperfect tool, so please bear with me. I'm doing the best with the tools I've got. But if we take the moon, again, and knowing now our senses can lie to us, because we know the reality of the situation is that the sunlight is everywhere in the night sky. The night sky is filled with sunlight. Only there's nothing there for the sunlight to reflect off. So we're not aware of the light. There's just no... If there was another moon, we'd be aware of the moon. That one would be shining too. There'd be two. So the sunlight would be shining off of both of those. So we know that just because we can't see the light that is shining out into the space, is shining out into the void blackness of space, we know the light is there, we just can't see it because it's not reflecting off of anything. All we can see is the moon because the moon is there for the light to reflect off. The moon can absorb that light. The light can shine upon it and it can reflect. So, when you come to see yourself as the individual body-mind and we're wondering, so why can't I feel anything else? We have to recognize that the consciousness is everywhere. It's just there's nothing for it to be aware of in the space around you. It's just bouncing off of this one. But the light is everywhere. The consciousness is everywhere. And when you're contemplating and wondering, so why can I only feel this one? Well, in this analogy, you are the moon. You are the moon that the light is shining off, and that's all you can fixate on because that's the only part of the consciousness that you as the individual body-mind is aware of. Now, there is not really going to be a satisfactory, full, complete answer for the mind because once we've reached the full, satisfactory, complete answer, the mind disappears. So we're never quite going to get to the end of it. But understanding that as the individual body-mind, you are the moon that the sunlight is reflecting off of. The consciousness itself is aware of everything, everywhere at all times, infinite, open, and universal. It's not that you the individual mind then wants to think, well, therefore, if I'm infinite universal consciousness, I should be able to be aware of everything. But that's a misunderstanding of the mind. That is a misunderstanding of the mind. The mind is trying to, in a sense, apply its own limitations to infinite universal consciousness. Understand that the consciousness is aware of the mind. The consciousness itself is not mind. The consciousness is awareness. The consciousness is consciousness. That's it. Mind is aware of mind. Mind is aware of body. This individual one is hyper-focused on this individual one. So, we've come to some form of understanding there. This is just going to take some depth of understanding. The consciousness itself is aware of the passing of this individual body-mind that continually flows, continually changes, continually moves, continually evolves within the space, the infinite expanse of being. But you are not this individual body-mind. You are the conscious awareness of the individual body-mind. So why can't we feel all of them? Because consciousness already isn't you. Consciousness is just consciousness. And it's not that you can't feel everyone else, you also can't feel this one. Consciousness doesn't feel the individual body-mind. The consciousness is aware of the feeling of the individual body-mind. The individual body-mind feels the individual body-mind, but consciousness does not. Consciousness is just observing it. So from the space of the open, infinite, universal consciousness, you are simply aware of the individual body-mind having an experience. But the infinite, universal consciousness is not having that experience. It is merely aware of the experience, just as it's aware of the experience of every being. But you, as an individual body-mind, obviously cannot be aware of the experiences of all the other individual body-minds, because you can only be aware of the individual body-mind that is currently having the experience of being an individual body-mind. The consciousness is the awareness of this experience, just as it's aware of all the others. So it's not a sense of, why can't I, the individual body-mind, feel everybody else's experience? It's understanding even the consciousness is aware of all those experiences, but is not having the experience itself. It is not feeling the experience itself. So therefore, if you are the infinite universal consciousness, you do not have a body. I think that's about as far as I can go with that one today. It's going to take a little while to process and understand. Thank you so much for listening. I hope some of that's been helpful. People get upset when I talk about the like and subscribe button, so I'm not going to mention it. I have started a memberships option on my channel. If you want to support me in my work, help me upgrade my equipment. Yeah, I think that's about everything I have for Spiritual Bleach today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay present.